Harry Reid Airport now, since corrupt Nevada politicians took it upon themselves, without so much as even asking the people who lived here, to rename it after one of the most divisive, hated politicians this state has ever known as their own vanity project. Gotta love what Las Vegas commissioners' priorities are in the middle of a huge economic crisis. At 10:21, the group of helicopters that previously took off to the north start to return south, and they all land at Mavericks like nothing ever happened. At 10:22, after hovering above the Delano roof for several minutes, the Southwest planecopter turns off its transponder. If you're wondering that if despite all the distractions going on that night, if anyone happened to catch a helicopter near the roof of the Delano,
Look, I should think of the helicopter right in front of me. Huh? Look, the helicopter right in front of me.
Isn't that the Delano? It's not the Delano, not the freaking Mandalay Bay. The helicopter's right over the Delano. I think he was on the roof. Yeah, because the helicopter's over the roof right there.
Sit on the back.
Yeah, look, he's hovering over the Delano. It's not the Mandalay Bay. It's that motherfucker right there.
You see that shit?
I think we're safe now.
don't get too excited. Without a timestamp or a clearer video, we can't rule this out as being Metro, since they do show up right as the planecopter leaves, and since Metro did take one sweep at Delano's rooftop on radar at around 10:37 for some reason. This could all be solved by simply releasing the footage from the roof the entire night, but I won't hold my breath waiting for Lombardo to be forthcoming about any information that might actually help the case. Is now a good time to mention that Delano is also connected to the Mandalay Bay through a series of underground tunnels and hallways? It's also where a 911 call would come in later about two armed men in khakis firing off several rounds, which is something that would be backed up by other witnesses that heard it too.
We were herded into Delano's, and my friend and I, we were sitting there for about 10 minutes, and then we heard 4 to 5 shots ring out.
And we met up with these security guards and police officers who asked us what we were doing and told us to run away. And we heard gunshots from around the corner. We were in the Delano, right next to a walkway that connects the Mandalay Bay at the Delano, and we heard gunshots from right out that hallway. So we think that the police were dealing with the shooter while we were down there.
At 10:24, Metro 5's helicopter finally arrives to the scene, 8 minutes after the shooting at the festival had already ceased.
Las Vegas Metro Police Department helicopter that just missed all the action.
One of the things Sheriff Lombardo was never able to explain was why he felt it was safe to wait over an hour to breach the room, or why their lone gunman just magically stopped shooting for no reason, despite all the unused guns, extra ammo, and the fact police weren't even at his door yet. Wouldn't it make more sense that what actually determined the length of the attack wasn't whenever the shooter randomly decided to give up, but how long it would take Metro to scramble a helicopter to the scene? All you would need to do is listen to a police scanner to know they're on their way. Another helicopter on the scene would have blown whatever air maneuvers were going on that night and probably whatever else was really going on. Starting at 10:24 and again at 10:34, reports come in about two separate suspicious vehicles bolting out and driving the wrong way down the strip. Suspects or just scared people trying to get away? I guess we'll never know. Though don't tell me they couldn't pull those plates off security and traffic cams. From 10:27 to 10:33, Metro Helicopter 5 starts hovering over McCarran's airport runway, looking for something. At 10:35, there's reports of an active shooter on the runway. Okay, I guess we know what they were looking for now. And McCarran makes the decision to turn the lights off on both runways. Why? Wouldn't that make it easier for a shooter to hide or get away in whatever vehicle or aircraft they're obviously heading to the airport for? Did they miss their first helo extraction? At 10:38, Metro finally sends out their first tweet about the incident, already strangely implying it's a shooter in the singular, even though everyone on scene still believes there are multiple shooters and shots are still being heard outside the venue. This is actually around the time where all hell breaks loose with hundreds of 911 calls about hearing shots.
My mic was off, and so I had paused it because the airport could have shut off the lights as a way to disguise the law enforcement agents. Where if they had night vision capabilities, it looked like they did, so they'd be able to see his heat signature or the suspect's heat signature using these NVGs, and he would not be able to see them. So it could possibly be for that reason.
And seeing gunmen across the strip in a pattern that keeps heading north away from the festival. At 10:43, there's a report of a suspicious white male seen wearing fatigues and going into a motorhome at the Motel 6 near Tropicana. 6 minutes later, a 911 call comes in about seeing two more suspicious men wearing bulletproof vests and walking calmly away from where everyone is running at the same location. The motel is directly east of the venue, right between the Tropicana and the airport, and that little blue circle right here. Also at 10:43 is when things start to get crazy over Sundance helicopters. A man calls about his girlfriend, who's the supervisor there, being pinned down with a bunch of people. He claims she heard shots outside, and there's a girl with a gunshot wound injured in the hangar. 15 minutes later, a woman calls in lieu of her daughter, because for some reason no one inside could get through to 911 like it was being blocked, that had also complained about hearing shots outside and a woman down with a gunshot wound. 10 minutes later, after the boyfriend calls back, saying his girlfriend now believes there are multiple suspects on the premise and everyone there is trying to hide from them. How was this never looked into? At 10:45, according to reports, EMTs calling complaining about being shot at the Tropicana.
Control 374. I got medics reporting that they're getting shot at in Tropicana.
10:51 is when the first report comes in at the Oasis apartments from people hearing shots and seeing suspicious people there. A little while later, someone in the same apartments calls about two suspicious men changing in the bushes outside. The apartments are directly across from Gate 7, where shots were heard by multiple witnesses and at least one gunman was seen firing into the crowd from the parking lot. It's also at 10:51 that officers confirm over the radio that Mandalay Bay and the area of Giles and Alibaba is the second confirmed shooting location. I would love to tell you what the bullet forensics and the asphalt say about all this random trajectory, but as journalist Matt Couch noticed when he went to examine the location for himself, it had already been tarred over and repaired, making that impossible. At 10:52, Metro 5 lands in the parking lot at Harley-Davidson to load up a two-man sniper team for the next 8 minutes. According to Lombardo, at 10:55, 8 officers finally arrived to the stairwell adjacent to Paddock's room. 2 minutes later, and 52 minutes after the shooting began, they finally breached the barricaded stairwell door. At 10:59, Metro Helicopter 5's transponder goes dark and is unaccounted for the next 5 minutes. At 11:02, a Metro officer calls in a report about a suspicious person heading toward the Delano. At 11:03, a report comes in of an active shooter coming down the escalator from New York, and no less than a minute later, 911 calls start pouring in about hearing shots there, including one from a security guard who specifically heard 5 to 6 shots fired near the Zumanity Theater, which is interesting because it would be someone from New York security that would later deny people heard shots there at all. Less than a minute after that call, reports of suspects down and a gunman at the front desk of New York would come in. A minute after that, a woman calls 911 to describe the shooter she saw on the casino floor of New York. Most of the reports and 911 calls would be corroborated and backed up by multiple witnesses like this throughout the night. Lombardo and MGM Resorts want you to believe that none of these things happened. But the fact they've never released the security cam footage from any of the hotels at night to settle it once and for all tells me it's probably the 1,000+ witnesses telling the truth and not hotels worried about hurting their tourism. At 11:07, another report of a shooter at the airport comes in, with people taking cover in a hangar from him there. At the same time, a report of a male getting out of a white Ford Dually running north with a rifle comes in. At 11:08, a man calls 911 in room 3135, which is only 2 floors down and directly below Paddock's, reports hearing a single gunshot that was also heard by his manager staying below him as well. It's been 10 minutes since SWAT breached the stairwell and 12 minutes before they would blow the door to 135 open, so what did they hear? It's also at 11:08 that a possible bomb threat comes in about a black Audi parked at Luxor with wires coming out of it. Something fake fact checkers would later claim was false, even though the bomb squad had to be called in to check and clear it. At 11:10, a woman calls 911 to report 2 bodies down at Zumanity. This matches with the 911 call made by security there earlier. At 11:11, another wave of calls from Tropicana roll in, including reports of 2 gunmen on the roof. Somewhere between all these reports, a street security cam operator catches 2 people going back and forth on the roof. Check it out.
Knowing that the suspect would be very likely coming through that field of view. So probably a couple of camera operators communicating with one another.
At 11:17, someone's mother calls 911 to report that her daughter was shot at Fatburger and that there are shots being heard at that location now. At 11:18, an employee working at a restaurant inside Aria reports hearing a gunshot, which is quickly followed by a series of calls from other people hearing shots there as well. A moment after that, a man staying at the Cosmo reports seeing a man outside his window going batshit crazy with the gun on the walkway bridge right underneath the Aria sign. 1 minute before Paddock will be found dead, shots ring out at Bellagio. What follows will be a flood of 911 calls about a shooting at their entrance. A Canadian man claimed he and his wife were at the Bellagio taking photos when panic broke out in the hotel lobby just before 11:20. He heard someone yell, "There's a shooter," right before hearing 5 to 6 shots ring out. Renee Downs also witnessed and documented her experience there.
So we went to order a drink, and then all of a sudden, this huge crowd came rushing through the doors. The block things that you stand at the front, the red ropes, were all just, people weren't running around them, they were running over them. And we heard the gunfire. And the best that I can describe it, Tracy, is the fact that it was like if you take a board and you drop it on the floor, and it was like just this like that, and it was automatic. And I didn't know what kind of gunfire until my husband told me afterwards.
At 11:20, over an hour after the shooting began, Metro finally breaches Paddock's door. Anyway, we are limited in knowing what actually happened from here on out, as officers were constantly told throughout the night to turn their body cameras off for reasons I'd like to know.
Yeah, my camera's on. My camera's on too. Yeah, turn them off. I'll turn them off. Yeah, my camera's on too.
For some reason that you might have already noticed, LVPD officers were under the impression that SWAT took down the shooter that night, with CNN even going as far as to claim that Paddock tried to fight his way through officers and even shot one of them before they were forced to kill him. Because journalism.
It was initially reported that perhaps he had taken his own life at the very moment the SWAT team was making entry into his room on the 32nd floor. Now they've clarified that point. They say that as the SWAT officers actually broke in the door, the gunman charged them, made it through the door, struggled with the officers, and was able to get off at least one shot, wounding one SWAT officer in the leg.
And they wonder why we call them fake news. So apparently everyone except the K-9 officer leaves their body cameras off, and the LVPD had to be sued to even release that in full. Let's see why. Wait, now the fire alarm goes off, but not when 1,000 rounds were getting shot off in the room? Weird, but okay, let's see if there's anything else weird going on.
What about if you not have a broken window? Well, no, there's several rooms here for you. Do you remember window right where that curtain is right by the door? Stand by. We've got curtains open on a window that's not broken. It's us. Corey, it's us. No, it's us. Go ahead. I'm up here.
Wait, what? The officer is standing right where the broken window should be, and he can't find it? Shouldn't he literally be stepping and crunching down on hundreds of shell casings and broken glass, according to LVPD's crime scene photos? And why are the curtains damaged to hell in the pics, but look perfectly fine in that video? And for the record, this particular can't find the broken window footage was edited out when mainstream media outlets like the Associated Press aired the footage. Why? What's going on here? I can find footage of the very few times shots were fired out of 134, but I'll be damned if I'm able to find footage of muzzle fire coming from 135 anywhere. Metro 5's helicopter was also unable to find the broken window on their first sweep. I've sat through the footage myself, and weirdly enough, I can't find it either. It does magically appear on helicopter cam after 11:56 and instantly blatantly visible by morning, but those moments in between not seeing it and seeing it are censored out of Metro helicopters footage from that night. Why? To make it even more interesting, a 911 call would come in from a man staying below paddock, complaining about hearing an explosion going off and hearing glass fall outside his window at 11:32.
Got a question here. So I just checked into Mandalay Bay, and I'm on the 21st floor, and I just heard what sounded like a explosion above me, and then glass coming down around me, or right outside the window.
So either someone set a charge up to blow out the window at the same time they breached 134, so they could claim they got the shooter and calm the public, and that's how the curtains get ruined and glass gets everywhere. Or the charge from breaching 134 shook a big enough chunk of glass loose, making a hard to notice slightly broken window now more visible and obvious, which for some reason shooting 1,000 rounds out of didn't shake anything loose off earlier. This is why we, the taxpayers, pay for body cams, so you can use them. Although I do love how body cam footage does pick up officers raiding Paddock's minibar on a hot crime scene.
Want the Pringle?
Like, who cares? Like, let them do that. Oh my God, guys.
One suspect down in Trop, it sounds like.
I understand officers have hard jobs, and I'm back with the blue and all. But are you fucking kidding me right now?
Come on, calm down.
And what suspect is down at the Tropicana, by the way? What a complete shit show of an investigation. Anyway, the two officers looking for the broken window they can't happen to find are Brett Brosnahan and Corey Mickelson, who aren't even listed in the final report as being there, which makes me feel real good about Metro's record-keeping skills. But at least now we know how hard drives can walk off a crime scene, and evidence as important as the door locks get tampered with.
The status of that door that was locked in the suite is pretty important, right? Because the reason we're not looking for anyone else.
My audio was off. God damn it, I did it again. But what I was saying was that, Mindy, this is a really great video, so I don't want to just say because, like, she's, a little exaggerated on her response regarding the law enforcement guys eating Pringles. I didn't think it was a big deal, but I mean, if they're not actual law enforcement, that is a huge deal. And so I've said this in numerous videos over the years, but there are people that do plant themselves within multiple different government agencies and pretend to be people they are not, to be clear, and there's no record of these names within these organizations. And so plants in law enforcement, paramedics, fire department, military, you name it. And I think that Jean Pelletier and even the heads of FEMA, these are these types of people that are planted there. They have no technical official government status, and they're just playing a role. And we need to pay more attention to that.
Is because the door was locked from the inside. Okay, right? Mm-hmm. This is the fulcrum of the entire case. Everything else either opens up to that or closes that. Of course, Lombardo closed it. Mm-hmm. But this is the blunder. In their final report, the status of the deadbolt was extended, which means the door was breached while the door was locked, so therefore the deadbolt's sticking out.
Makes sense.
In that first preliminary report, same photograph of the door and the lock, the deadbolt is in. Was it locked? Was it open?
There's a huge issue here whether Paddock's deadbolt was locked from the inside or not, since LVPD managed to post pictures of it unlocked in the preliminary and locked in the final report. Considering Lombardo's entire "we don't have to investigate anything further" case of Paddock being the lone shooter rested solely on him barricading himself inside his room, this was a very important and suspicious detail to screw up. Now's probably a good time to mention that many LVPD officers working that night were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, barring them from ever talking about what happened. Why? Does that sound like Lombardo is running an honest, transparent investigation with nothing to hide? As much as it seems that I'm bashing LVPD's handling of the case, it's really Sheriff Lombardo who is...
See, those are types of NDAs that I would get legal advice over before signing at this point. And is that an unlawful order? Are these unlawful orders? Yes, I do believe they are. And so there's a strong argument, and we should be backing people that question specific NDAs to go ahead with that and do a review.
To blame here, as he handicapped his men from telling the truth and solving the crime from the get-go. Your job, Sheriff Lombardo, is to serve and protect the people of Vegas, not cover it for the FBI, who clearly screwed up here somewhere or orchestrated it all together, as it's been discovered they like to do.
It is remarkable what we still don't know about what actually took place that day. Until this Monday night, for example, when it was reported by Revolver News, we had no idea that at least 20 organizers and participants in the events at the Capitol have not been indicted, despite the nationwide dragnet for people who were there. This is interesting. The government knows exactly who these people are, but has refused to charge them with crimes. Why is that? Well, because it seems like they may have had some connection to the government. Some of the people who broke into the Capitol, committed crimes while inside, and encouraged others to do the same appear to have been in contact with the FBI before the event. Let that sink in for a moment. The events of January 6th that you keep hearing about endlessly, events that Democrats in Congress describe as an act of war carried out by white supremacists, as dangerous and historically significant as Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Those events apparently were at least in part organized and carried out in secret by people connected to federal law enforcement.
Also going on at 11:20 as Paddock is being found dead, a woman calls 911 after hearing a single gunshot inside the Miracle Miles shop at Planet Hollywood. She claims others there heard multiple. Other witnesses also start calling in about hearing shots there, two of which specifically mention that they heard them at Blondie's bar. At 11:21, a weird call comes in from a very unemotional woman claiming there were gunmen holding people hostage at Brixie near T-Mobile and 20 people were shot there. Whether it's fake or not, did anyone look into it? Because calling in a fake report to 911 is not only a crime within itself, but some of these more bizarre and random claims might be done as distractions to spread Metro thin that night and later discredit all the corroborated witness claims that would come in. It's in between 11:23 and 11:56 that Metro 5's helicopter footage is redacted and edited out. At 11:23, calls about the shots heard at Bellagio continue to pour in from people who had to run to safety. One call was even from a Bellagio employee who was working at her station near the front entrance when it happened. At 11:26, a man calls 911 with his son on the line to say there are still scattered shots going off at the Tropicana. Remember, EMTs also complained about getting shots fired at them there, so it can't just be chalked up to civilians being scared. Also at 11:26, a man calls from inside the chandelier room in the Cosmo, claiming to have heard gunshots go off there, which was quickly followed by other corroborated witness calls. The Cosmo is next to the Bellagio, and in a later call from security where they deny hearing shots in their own premise, they would deflect and blame the Cosmo as to where people had heard them. But you admit you heard them, right? 11:26 is also when SWAT officers blast their way to the adjoining side room 134, and one of the cops almost shoots somebody.
Where those shots come from?
Oops. That would be the accidental discharge made by poor trigger finger safety McGee here, as he let off not one, not two, but 3 accidental rounds in succession. Also, how is Lombardo's narrative that Paddock was running back and forth between the rooms work when obviously someone had locked the door to 134 from the other side? They just had to blow it to hell to get it open. So how did Paddock lock it and then magically transport himself over to 135 to die on the floor? Let's look at the only other available camera angle.
Region 5. Shots fired in Trop. Hold. Everybody hold. Yeah, we still have this closed door right here. All right. Mach, are you staying? I'm staying. All right.
Wait, what room did they just breach? Because it sure doesn't match what 134 looks like in their evidence photos. This one's got a shopping bag and TV remotes on the bed. No guns. This is not this. This is not this. Did they just take on a mass shooter without clearing the adjacent rooms of innocent civilians before barging in and shooting accidental holes in the wall? Considering one of the deceitful excuses Lombardo gives as to why officers loiter around for over an hour before going in is that they were clearing rooms nearby when obviously that's not true. The other excuse Lombardo gives as to why the breach took so long was that he was waiting for SWAT. I don't know if you noticed here, but this is not a SWAT team. It's one SWAT officer, 2 K-9 units, and a bunch of regular patrol officers. And good on them for going in. But where's the rest of the 40-plus man SWAT team and all their gear? What were they doing that night? They're not anywhere. At 11:29, an officer pulls one possible suspect out of a trash can. Okay, why was the guy in a trash can? Was he hiding from shots? Did he see something? At 11:30, a CVS employee near Bellagio reports hearing multiple shots and people running. At the same time, a woman calls to say her and her wife are hiding from gunshots at the Bellagio. She claims she heard about 4 to 5, which corroborates with all the other witness statements from that incident. Then a man calls 911 to say he heard a single gunshot and saw people running at Excalibur now, followed by the first of many calls from people hearing gunshots and running from a shooter on the Paris casino floor, which is corroborated over the scanner by a female officer at the scene.
That's where it's going.
Is a male with a 413 at Paris.
Paris! Hold up. Paris! So, Paris, 444 Paris. Paris. Fuck.
This channel is South Central that we do have one suspect down in custody for SWAT.
At 11:31, an officer takes 3 suspects into custody, including 2 women with possible weapons. Okay, what happened with that? 11:32 is when that guy calls about hearing broken glass come down outside his window, and where a woman staying on Paddock's floor calls and worried about a fire because there's smoke coming in from underneath her door. A minute later, another woman staying on the 33rd floor would call about an explosion occurring below her. It's strange only because why would they notice and complain about the second breach but not the first? At 11:33, another corroborating call comes in about hearing gunshots going off at the Paris casino. At 11:35, the officers in Paddock's room wonder out loud where all these other reports of shots are coming from. Oh, he looks like he's been dead a while, you say? And you're wondering what all these other shots are that people are calling in about? Me too. It's also at 11:35 that Metro hovers over the Tropicana a little bit and then flies away up north? What? What could possibly be more pressing than what's going on in Vegas right now?
11:31, 11:32. He's going to spend a minute or two there, and then he's going to head north to the North Las Vegas Summerlin area, presumably on another assignment, although I don't know what other assignment could be possible on a night like this. So there he is again, popped up like right before 11:35. So he spent about 2 minutes there, presumably offloading personnel. I don't know why else he would land, but he makes a brief stop over Tropicana and then heads north. I zoomed out here so you can see he heads north. He ends up over near the Summerlin area of Las Vegas.
It's also at 11:35 that someone sees a man with a gun go into the bathroom at Luxor.
Number 18, at security talking to me right now. They stated that a person saw a male with a 413 inside the Luxor male's restroom.
At 11:36, a report comes in about 5 suspects with machine guns, all in black, close to the Stratosphere at the Girl Collection. 2 minutes later, over the Enterprise police scanner, dispatch would put out an officer warning about 5 snipers on the east side of the venue and a team headed there with rifles. I have no idea if they're talking about the same 5 individuals because that's literally all that exists publicly about it. So what the hell was that about? And don't tell me a strip club doesn't have cameras in their parking lot. At 11:37, a German tourist hiding in the laundry room calls 911 to report the shootout at Bellagio. Also at 11:37, a man calls 911 who's huddled with about 100 other people in a break room at Planet Hollywood to report hearing gunshots there. When people know someone else right next to them is calling 911, they generally don't also call to say the same thing. So just imagine how many witnesses beyond all these calls there really are. At 11:40, Metro had a man call 911 to report a deceased woman in the parking lot near the Catholic Church. As I've mentioned, there were several fatalities that occurred outside of the venue that the LVPD never released bullet forensics for, and which prevents us from knowing if these victims were hit from any of the crossfire shots that people heard coming from the east side near Gate 7 or northeast at Tropicana. Either they have the forensic reports and need to be forced to release them, or everyone involved from top to bottom needs to be fired and replaced for not doing their job. It's also at this time a call comes in about a man with a rifle that everyone keeps seeing get out of a white pickup truck at Bellagio.
There's a male walking in with a rifle. Bellagio employee entrance.
Thanks to active listeners to the police scanner that night, the gunman's license plate was transcribed and recorded as 444 XLM. So law enforcement at the least knows whose truck this is. So where's the report for that investigation? Doesn't the public deserve to know who that man is? A minute later, a woman calls about people running into Harris, saying there's a shooting outside there. People call not only about hearing gunshots, but seeing the shooter. At 11:43, it's discussed that the officers who breached Paddock's room leave to assist with all the other calls coming in on the strip. After K-9 Officer Bitsko turns his body cam off, it's the last time we ever see inside Paddock's room for the rest of the night. It's also at 11:43, a man calls saying he heard multiple shots in the distance from his room in one of MGM Grand's towers. At the exact same time, a couple calls 911 about hearing shots fired at Caesars, and a man sheltering outside at the Mirage with people calls 911 to report gunshots there. The Mirage is right next to Caesars. At 11:47 is when Flamingo Security calls 911 about hearing shots fired in their back parking lot and someone returning a gun to officers near Valet. If you're keeping track, that's now 2 guns found on the street turned in by civilians.
3820, and also just so you know, we had got before the shots fired, we did have a guest who brought a gun to officers out near Valet. So it was a gun found also near the Valet entrance.
Oh, near the Valet entrance, excellent.
Either they should trace back to someone and garner an explanation, or these didn't trace back to anyone on purpose because they were meant to cause distractions and be thrown away. It's also at this time that a man calls 911 about hearing shots and having to hit the deck 30 to 40 minutes ago at Bellagio. The 911 operator confirms to the man that there have been multiple reports of shootings in that area. Why does Sheriff Lombardo want everyone to think this entire town just imagined all this?
There. You can see all the cops right here. But earlier, there's people running down the street. Everyone was just running right here. And they said something about shooting at Bellagio, but I haven't heard anything on the news yet. All the cops were over there. So all these people running down the street and running across this bridge with their hands up in the air. There's a SWAT team going across the mark, got some pictures in the camera. And then all these people are just running down the street. It seems to have calmed down a lot right here. Now everyone's back down to that end. Because I think that's where they took the shooter down. Because something is going on right there, too. That's the Bellagio. Hope they shot those fucking assholes.
At 11:58, Metro finally tweets out almost 2 hours after the first shots were fired that one suspect is down, but not to go to the strip. Thanks. It's also at this time officers find Mary Lou Danley's credit card in the room. Wait, she left the country without her credit card? That's a little bit more than just letting someone use your comps, but okay. It's also at 11:58 that it gets very interesting. Over an hour and a half after shooting ceased at the festival, 2 separate volleys of automatic gunfire are not only heard by everyone in the Bellagio area, it's also picked up by at least 9 different police comms.
We are not.
Oh
shit.
Units, we're getting a 415A now, Bellagio PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
When they breached, they said one SWAT shot him.
Units, we're getting A now, Bellagio PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
That's a shot. That's a shot.
What was that? Oh, right here. Go. Oh shit, that's machine gun.
Units, we're getting a 415A now, Bellagio PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
Is that what it was? Right here. Go. Oh shit, that's machine gun. That's machine gun fire.
Units, we're getting a 415A now, Bellagio PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
Control.
Keep in mind, there are still multiple reports of people seeing a gunman at the Bellagio at this time. I guess now we know why Lombardo fought so hard to keep that body cam footage from being released. At 12:11 in the morning, a woman calls frustrated that her husband has been sheltering at the Mirage because he heard shots fired there earlier, but that the casino's management is denying having any knowledge of a shooting there at all. The 911 operator confirms to the woman that there were indeed reports about shots being fired at the Mirage. Why is hotel security calling in to lie about things after the fact, especially when many of the initial calls were made by their own employees? At 12:12, an officer gets a report of a white male wearing a black t-shirt going into clubs and clearing them out with a gun. All the manpower and surveillance in the city really couldn't track this guy down. At 12:14, reports of a possible suspect on the 4th floor of Mandalay Bay comes in. At 12:20, reports come in of gunshot victims at Reno and Giles. It's been 2 hours since the shooting at the festival ended, and they're just finding these people now. And then there's a report of one in custody at the Motel 6 where people had called in about suspicious individuals there earlier. And that's about all I can find out about that situation. At 12:21, a woman calls 911 stating a friend who is an armed security guard at Harrah's just had an active shooter run through his shit. A few minutes later, a man would call in about hearing a gunshot go off there. At 12:23, things escalate from suspect to an active shooter situation somehow on the 4th floor of Mandalay Bay. Is there a reason Mandalay Bay wasn't forced to hand over all their footage from that night? At 12:31 a.m., Metro tweets out that they do not believe there are any more shooters. Really? A minute after claiming there were no more shooters, an officer requests a strike team to assist with apprehending a suspect on the east side of the venue. I'm certainly glad patrol officers didn't just give up looking at any point of the night. It's very clear at this moment that Lombardo obviously knew there were still other possible suspects, but knowingly chose to mislead the public anyway. At 12:35, Valley Security detains a suspect who claimed he was involved. Was he part of the people causing distractions? Where's the report on this? I don't care if he's crazy as hell. I want to know what this guy has to say. At 12:46, more reports of shots roll in from New York again. At 1 a.m., Metro reports the suspect's name is Stephen Paddock, even though his ID has been laying on the counter this whole time according to their own crime scene photos. And why, when they have his photo ID, do they insist on using this useless picture all over the news? Did they not want people to recognize him and offer up more info for some reason? We later find out that this is also when it's discovered that there were 3 other female suspects registered to that room and set to check out the next day. A fact that was kept hidden from the public and never, ever, ever explained. Everything is redacted except their first names, Joanna, Lori, and Katie, on the scanner. Are they accomplices? Are they witnesses? Even if they're just hookers, wouldn't you like to know what they have to say about all this? I can think of no good reason that the FBI would choose to protect the people staying in Paddock's room for one of the largest mass shootings in America unless they're hiding their own screw-up are protecting their own people. It is absolutely inexcusable that this much information has been kept from the public over a mass shooting they want us to believe there was no motive for, and in which we're supposed to just live in fear forever and give up all our rights for. At 1:04, the bomb squad finally clears a suspect vehicle at Luxor. It turns out it was just one of those weird electronic self-driving cars. At 1:25 a.m., a man calls 911 about seeing two men dressed like military contractors firing off rounds down at the Delano.
We were standing in the bar area, in the they said at the bottom of the Delano, the casino level of the Delano, and I saw two gunmen with look like AR-15 type rifles come around the corner of the hallway there, and they positioned themselves in a tactical manner with their rifles pointing down the hallway. At that point, I moved away from the hallway so I wouldn't be shot at or shot. And then as soon as I moved, shots were fired, multiple rounds, probably 5 to 10 rounds at a minimum. And then moved to ran to the elevator and took the elevator up.
At 1:32 a.m., a woman contacts police about catching a shooter on video. So, where's this video? Was it scrubbed off the internet like all the other ones I can't find anymore? Where are all the surveillance videos from casinos that night? You mean to tell me there's no camera on Delano's roof or Tropicana's roof? No, we're just limited to what we can scrape together from the body cam footage we forced out of Metro and citizens' cell phones that they were nice enough to post. At 3:49 in the morning, officers recover a casing in the bathroom at Paris.
Got pictures? All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Here, want to go up? Yeah, it's a gold dot spear, I'm fairly confident that's ours. I don't think he was using 223.
Make sure you check
Considering people also saw a man with a gun go into Luxor's bathroom, is this maybe where the distraction shooters were going in to change? Is that how a casing could fall out on the floor? And if so, where's the videos of people entering and exiting both those bathrooms for the night? This is the most insulting excuse of an investigation this country has ever seen. It's sometime during the night of the shooting that citizen journalist Shepard Ambulis noticed that the public access Earth Cam facing Bellagio had 2 hours of its imagery scrubbed from the website. It was later replaced with imagery that, of course, showed nothing. On the morning of October 2nd, thousands of people woke up to the confusion of a complete media blackout of anything that happened outside of the festival grounds. By midday, authorities quickly announced Paddock as the only shooter and never, ever explained anything further beyond that.
Because I've talked to everyone that was in our group. There was about, 8 of us at that time. And I've also talked to other friends of mine that were there that I didn't know was there until recently. And everyone that was on the ground that I've spoken to, we all know what we heard. And there's a difference between an echo and different firepower.
Thing that went on last night, I said to the girl, and with all the gunshots and stuff, I said, are you guys discounting rooms? How are you handling this? And she looked right at us and she said, there was no gunfire outside the Bellagio Hotel last night. And I looked and I was like, really? Okay, well, let me show you the video from where we were all blocked off and security and what I was, and I didn't even have to show it to them. She said, hold on one moment, ma'am, walks in the back, comes back out, slides our receipt over and says, here you go, you guys have a good day.
And the receipt had
0 goose eggs.
I did not see one news truck. I did not see one CNN, one ABC, one nobody. No Fox, no nobody. Okay? They weren't asking us anything. It's everybody else who wasn't there armchair guessing what's going on because it's obvious that they're being lied to. But they don't even know to the extent to which they are being lied to. I'm here to tell you to the extent to which you are being lied to. Everything that we know that night didn't exist the next day. Everybody knows that they're lying. Everybody.
We saw some pretty interesting things here, some things that warrant an explanation from the people that were in these helicopters. Why haven't the police asked these questions? Why are we still flying blind? And why doesn't the media care about evidence like this?
If I'm wrong about any of the facts and details I've just laid out, don't just tell me I'm wrong. Debunk me, please. Show me the missing footage. Show me how these instances were resolved, because everything I'm looking at screams government cover-up. One that sadly only got worse as conflicting facts, statements, and videos poured in after the fact. For days after the event, testimony from witnesses and survivors would roll in, and almost none of them matched the lone wolf narrative from the 32nd floor. Witnesses recalled hearing multiple calibers from multiple directions, parallel shots from ground level, seeing people with guns that weren't dressed like policemen firing into the crowd. In one report from a victim struck in the arm, she stated after running out the back gate at the festival on the east side, she heard gunshots there, and people were saying there was a shooter at Hooters as well. So her and her sister ran back to the other side, only to be stuck in the middle of it. Someone eventually kicked down the gate to the airport to escape, where her and her sister hid in a trailer for the next 3.5 hours. As they hid, they could hear gunshots coming from all around them, the top, the side, and specifically from the direction of Reno Street near the Tropicana. In one redacted statement, a stagehand who's used to loud sounds said they thought the shooter had to be close by because the sound of the gunfire was so close it affected their hearing for the next few days. If you remember, in front of the stage is where several fatalities suffered perfectly parallel trajectories. Despite all the evidence and despite not even having any preliminary investigations done, Lombardo somehow officially announces that the shooting was the work of a single gunman only 3 hours after the tragedy occurred. And he doesn't care if you have unanswered questions. He's just not going to answer them.
You know what causes trauma and inhibits closure is the suspicion that people are lying to you.
Almost on cue, the mainstream media fell into lockstep and dropped the story completely after only 2 weeks. And then the fake fact checkers came out in force to run defense for their manufactured lone shooter narrative. Not by actually debunking anything, but by simply declaring them to be false because Lombardo said so. I kid you not. The one where the Huffington Post debunks multiple shooters while their own interview witness claims that there were more than one is my favorite. Speaking of bullshit, these are the 3 separate timelines that Lombardo makes up. The first has Jesus Campos interrupting the shooter and saving the day, which is also Lombardo's excuse as to why his men were ordered to loiter in a hallway doing nothing for over an hour for no reason. All 3 versions would claim that they were evacuating the other rooms on that floor, but we already know that's not completely true. The second timeline Lombardo makes up has Campos getting shot at 9:59, which MGM doesn't like because it makes them look like they didn't call it in fast enough. The third timeline, which Lombardo compromises on with MGM, has Campos getting shot right before the shooting begins, like that's why it started, like that makes any sense at all. Helicopters were already in place, so I doubt a random security guard would ever be the initial catalyst for an event like this. From everything I've looked at and people I've talked to that were there, Campos was shot somewhere during the middle of the shooting, which is why he heard drilling sounds. Also worth noting is that rounds came down the hallway not just at campus, but later when the engineers showed up about the door barricade. So clearly someone's watching the room service camera like a hawk while this shooting is commencing. I don't even think Jason Bourne could pull off the maneuvers Lombardo is claiming out of an out-of-shape 64-year-old man with 0 military experience. Then the FBI instantly declared that there was no evidence it was an act of international terror, even though ISIS took credit for it immediately, claiming they had converted Paddock over their official channels, which, according to experts, they rarely do unless it's actually true. Now, there's no tangible evidence that Paddock suddenly became an angry Islamic terrorist overnight, but if he was working for the feds in an illegal gun sale to them, well, that just might be the cover story he'd be using and going for. On October 4th, in crumbling under public scrutiny and refusing to answer the public's questions, Lombardo feels the need to announce that there is no conspiracy between the FBI, LVPD, and the MGM. It's also on this day that a Mandalay Bay employee leaks a receipt from September 27th showing Paddock had dinner for 2. 5 days after the shooting, with no answers being given to the public, YouTube starts banning videos that would allude to multiple shooters and an FBI cover-up. On October 9th, one of the most compelling and vocal witnesses against the lone gunman narrative, Kimberly Suckamel, dies unexpectedly in her sleep at 28. She had spoken publicly about seeing and hearing multiple shooters during the attack and had made it known on social media that she was organizing a survivors group so others like her could come forward with the truth. Here are some of the excerpts from her lengthy archive Facebook post. Bullets were coming from every direction. Behind us, in front of us, to the side of us. But I just know that there was someone chasing us. The further we got from the venue, the closer the gunfire got. I kept looking back, expecting to see the gunman, and I say men because there was more than one person, 100% more than one. The first place I remember getting to was a parking lot, and I told Cassie, we need to get under one of these trucks. She turned to me and started her way back to me, and that is when the gunfire got even closer than before. It was right there. It was within the parking lot. Everyone around us was panicking once again. The second place I remember going by was Hooters. We ran toward the entrance thinking we could take cover there, but as we got closer, a stampede of people ran out, terrified. We could only conclude that there was another gunman inside of that hotel. At some point, we ended up at the airport. I had been watching the news nonstop since I arrived back home to my family, and it just doesn't make sense. The story they are feeding everyone doesn't add up to our eyewitness accounts. There are multiple people stating that there was a lady toward the beginning of the evening who had made her way to the stage warning people we were all going to die. Why has she not been mentioned by authorities? Every single survivor I have talked to also remembers multiple shooters, and at least one from the ground. Why aren't we being taken more seriously? Tons of things don't add up. On October 13th, Jesus Campus was scheduled to have 5 different media interviews to straighten out the ever-changing timelines Lombardo was manufacturing. But instead, he disappears without explanation to Mexico. 5 days later, Jesus Campus would reappear on the very unserious Ellen DeGeneres show, where she leads him through an extremely controlled narrative per orders of MGM, who feared he would crumple and reveal their liability if he were ever interviewed by real reporters. Ellen decided to announce firm that this would be the only interview he will ever give on the topic. I should mention that Ellen's show is sponsored by MGM through slot machines that apparently make her millions because, I guess people just like really boring stuff. MGM slapped Campos with a gag order and paid him off in the form of 2 properties in Las Vegas, according to his own brother-in-law, who he had lived with and confided in about the matter. MGM never explained why Campos was hired as a security guard without being licensed either. Odd, considering they would be sued over their own lack of security. On October 11th, Paddock's home was burglarized, even though it should have been guarded. Reno police would blame an irresponsibly unlocked door and the wind. On October 21st, people started coming forward about how the FBI handed back laptops and cell phones from workers and concert goers that were taken in as evidence and then given back wiped clean. Fake fact-checker sites like Snopes, who just got busted this year for plagiarism and not actually fact-checking anything, declared it to be unproven, not because they actually looked into it whatsoever, but because they deemed it unproven because it was based off unsourced Facebook posts, even though the claim itself was made by at least 2 locals from their personal accounts. On October 25th, Lombardo reveals the hard drive from Paddock's laptop went missing from the crime scene. Mainstream media wants you to believe Paddock removed it himself, but doesn't feel the need to explain where it went since he never left the room. On October 28th, Danny Contreras, another survivor of Route 91, was found shot dead in a vacant lot in Las Vegas. He had taken to social media the day after the shooting in a tweet that was reposted hundreds of times about being chased by 2 gunmen at the concert. The censor Nazis at Twitter felt the need to suspend his account for somehow violating terms of service from beyond the grave. While Danny, Kimberly, and other Route 91 survivor passings after the incident could be chalked up to suspicious dark coincidences, it's enough to make people fear speaking out about whatever they saw and heard that night. On October 31st, Sheriff Lombardo finally admits an officer fired his weapon that night at the crime scene an entire month after it happened. On November 11th, Newsweek comes out with an insanely fabricated story claiming the non-political Paddock was a Trump supporter based off Sheriff Lombardo claiming he was because Trump was good for the economy and the stock market and thus Paddock must have liked him. Solid journalism there. Now, since Newsweek has felt the need to fact-check me personally in the past over things they admit in the article I was right about, let me fact-check them. If Paddock was really a Trump supporter, why would he shoot up a country concert full of them? Feels more like Lombardo was getting pushed in a corner for not doing an honorable investigation and decided to blame the victims as a cause of it instead. Good luck winning that Republican primary after this. On February 1st, 2018, unsealed documents, which also had to be sued for, revealed the FBI was seeking a person of interest for Route 91 that no one had heard about before by the name of Douglas Haig. Supposedly, he sold Paddock ammo he repurposed himself that, the ATF frowns upon, and ended up taking a plea deal. He was sentenced to 13 months in prison for conspiracy to manufacture and sell armor-piercing ammunition without a license. So, the FBI doesn't care about all the other people that were in Paddock's room that night, but they went hard after the guy that sold him bullets that he didn't even use? I'm glad this isn't about gun control or anything, especially considering anti-gun activists went as far as to talk about using Route 91 to repeal the entire Second Amendment. On May 2nd, 2018, Lombardo was court-ordered to release all the body cam footage from that night, although he dragged it on for over a year fighting it, taking it all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court. Now that you've seen it, I think you know why. On July 17, 2018, in one of the most unbelievably disgusting moves, MGM sues over 1,000 Route 91 victims, claiming they're not liable and that their security was enough at the time. That explains why employees helped Paddock load up multiple carts of gun cases and staff visited his room 10 times over the weekend and didn't report any of it. In July, MGM Resorts tried to qualify the shooting as an act of terrorism so they would have no liability to any of the survivors or the families of victims because, well, they're rich elitist shitbags. On August 3rd, 2018, Lombardo releases his final report on Route 91, which answered none of the questions I posed in this video. In fact, I actually think it ended up creating some of them. Despite experts expecting the settlement to reach in the billions, on September 20th, 2020, 3 years later, victims were finally awarded $800 million. MGM never admitted liability, and their insurance covered almost all of it. And from what I've personally heard from some of the victims, most of those funds ended up in the pockets of lawyers instead. Then there's also the issue of the $32 million raised on GoFundMe by Governor Sisolak and Sheriff Lombardo for the victims. Now, I can find articles on how they intended to disperse the money to people, but absolutely nothing showing that it ever was. When confronted about it, Lombardo claimed there was an audit done that apparently no one has ever seen and no one can find, and then goes on to ignore the person that asked.
Is there any way that we can audit the money?
This is 1 October ceremony. This isn't a political stance.
Sir?
This is the 1 October ceremony today. This isn't a political stance here.
No, has to do everything with the Mandalay Bay shooting.
Yeah, the 1 October funds have been audited. There was a committee. I don't want to talk about that today.
When we called the Secretary of State's office to demand they do an investigation, they stated it's actually no one's job in the entire state of Nevada to look into charity fraud. So that's how they've been getting away with all that stuff. Steve Sisolak ultimately used the press Lombardo gave him for the massacre to win his race for governor. One of the first things he did in office was to make a recall against him harder, for which he faced 2 of during COVID, when he decided to grant himself emergency powers to illegally suspend Nevadans' constitutional rights. He went as far as to even use OSHA to shut down events meant to gather signatures against him. He restricted the use of life-saving drugs, claiming they needed to be rationed, while he was actually hoarded by our own jail system here. He got busted for campaign fraud involving a cannabis company for which his friend, the useless Rhino Secretary of State, has yet to investigate or prosecute. Together, they solidified election fraud that she also refuses to investigate, even though she publicly admitted fraud occurred, but not widespread enough for her liking or whatever that means. Yeah, maybe people being accused of committing election fraud shouldn't be the ones in charge of investigating it. Meanwhile, his wife is winning no-bid government contracts that she then awards to her clients, which conveniently include his campaign donors through her consulting firm. Recently, he was also cited for causing a car wreck, and though he appeared extremely impaired on video, LVPD did not give him a sobriety test like the innocent guy he hit, and even let his CCP handlers remove mystery items from his car before they took it. He also sent Nevada schools communist-style fear-mongering propaganda about COVID, He gave away $1 million of our hard-earned tax money in the middle of an economic crisis to someone who's probably not that random for getting the jab. He also legalized giving someone AIDS on purpose and held a racially segregated event. Sisolak is currently running for re-election, if you can believe it. Sensing that sinking ship and not being able to afford someone else coming in and blowing their giant cover-up, Sheriff Lombardo has now decided to run for governor against Sisolak as a Republican, because in order to keep corruption going in Nevada, you have to own both teams running. There seems to be more support against him than for. I mean, I'm sent to Kingdom Come, and I've been in permanent Facebook jail the last 4 years, and even I have 237,000 more supporters than him, and I'm not the one running for governor or paying for ads. Considering his refusal to uphold the Constitution, defend our rights, and the fact he helped cover up one of the largest mass shootings in history, we'll see if he's still running once people in Nevada know the full truth about him from this video. The judge that originally heard the case, the daughter of the VP of security for the MGM at the time, Jennifer Tagliani, is now the chairwoman of the Nevada Gaming Commission. You see, in Nevada, for some corrupt reason, it's the Gaming Commission that's in charge of verifying our riggable Dominion voting machines. So yes, the commission the governor is in charge of appointing is in charge of making sure him and his people aren't cheating elections, because that's not an unbelievable immoral conflict of interest or anything. Now that I've laid out all the facts they didn't want you to know about, this is the part where everyone's going to ask me, now that I've looked at everything, what do I think happened? I'd honestly prefer people come to their own conclusions, but I also understand I easily spent more time researching and putting this together than any other article I've ever written or anything I've even done for college. And for the record, history degrees are nothing but neurotically researching and writing about subjects using stupid amounts of references, but at least it comes in handy for something. And while Lombardo is satisfied with writing everything off that happened on the Strip that night, whether it was witnessed by thousands of people and caught on video as distractions that he doesn't think he needs to investigate, I think I can at least lay down a more reasonable and plausible premise for you than that. Disclaimer, it's called an opinion. If it seems as if I left something out, it's because I was able to debunk it, there wasn't enough evidence for my satisfaction, or it had been scrubbed from the internet and I could neither find it nor verify it. I am praying more people come forward after this so we can find the missing pieces, or at least harass and sue Lombardo and all these casinos into releasing the missing footage and reports that could solve all this. There are also a lot of things I know but can't prove in a manner I can use yet, so I'm just going to keep this very conservative and stick to the facts at hand. So, it couldn't be clearer that the FBI and the LVPD covered up the attack to protect whoever was really behind it. What we don't know is why. Now, I can't think of a reason for burying it so quickly and so blatantly unless our government played some part in it in a way they shouldn't have, and they just can't afford to have people to know what they've done. If they wanted to solve it, they easily could, but they clearly don't want to, and they definitely don't want to give people the tools like me to do so for themselves. Now, I don't know if people were shooting from helicopters. People sure seem to think so. I think they at least played a role in providing air support and possible drop-offs and extractions of other gunmen. Going off eyewitness accounts and bullet trajectories, I believe there were shooters triangulating the concert to maximize fatalities and attempting to hide their own fire within the burst of automatic fire from Mandalay Bay. The amount of headshots and parallel trajectories tells me there was likely a sniper shooting from the main stage area, like many heard and suspected, a shooter in the parking lot that multiple people saw and heard, and at least a team or two over by the Tropicana Catholic Church area, while shell casings and other casualties were found. There might have been specific targets in the crowd, or it might have all been a distraction for something else. It really wouldn't be that hard, though, to take off with a casualty or more by pretending to take them to the hospital and then never accounting for the body later. No matter who else was involved or what the other targets and goals could have been, it still leads right back to our government and what they got out of covering up the murder of 58 innocent, hard-working American and Canadian patriots. And historically, that reason has always been to push a war, which in this case they denied foreign terrorism, so it can't be that. Or it's the Saudis again, which our government keeps protecting, and that's a whole other story. Or use it in the hopes that people will willingly forfeit their constitutional rights in the name of public safety, which has been used a lot these last few years. When Australia's Port Arthur shooting killed 35, their country ended up using it for a gun grab. Obama ominously praised the Australian people for giving up their gun rights and, quote-unquote, when Australia had a mass killing, it was so shocking the entire country said, well, we're going to have to completely change our gun laws. something I'm glad patriots didn't consider bowing down to, and something Australians might be regretting at this point. I think Paddock's real gig was more than likely selling illegal firearms, either for himself or the feds, and then laundering the money through gambling, which Ann Coulter hit on the head by pointing out how ridiculous the media was, proclaiming that in the lone world of video poker, Paddock made millions. Illegal gun trading is the only thing that explains why he bought guns separate from his personal collection and showcased them in an upscale, albeit garishly decorated Las Vegas suite. His last real job was decades ago as an accountant for Lockheed Martin, one of the largest military-industrial complex and government contractors out there. His complete lack of an online presence also makes him lean toward being some kind of federal spook. The explosive targets they found in his car are the same ones I use in discount pumpkins and watermelons or whatever to make things go boom in the desert, which would also make sense if he was planning on demonstrating them for a large gun sale. If his plan was to murder as many people at a concert across the street for absolutely no reason, then why wouldn't he have scopes mounted on all the guns the FBI claimed were used? They all had bump stocks because that was really important for whoever apparently set up the sale, but only half had scopes? He's worth over $1 million, and we're supposed to believe he wouldn't spend a little extra to go all out on his big moment? He also paid his taxes on his gambling wins before this happened because that's what someone does right before they go down in a blaze of glory, especially if they're an anti-government nut like the leftist rags tried to push. I love how The Guardian considers Paddock far right based off a conversation I guarantee you never happened with strangers about Ruby Ridge, Waco, and FEMA being used to push the New World Order, which he wouldn't be wrong about if he did. But according to them, not trusting the government is a right-wing thing. Yeah, no. Most people don't trust the government these days, and probably a whole lot less after this year. I think whatever gun deal he was doing went sideways with whoever was in that room. He got popped somewhere along the line to be the patsy, I don't know, probably when they heard that 345 lone gunshot and the door lock started to get messed with. And then whoever was shooting in the room could have just escaped out of the hotel with all the other guests during the hour officers were loitering in a stairwell. Even the lone SWAT officer was wondering if the shooter was still in the room because they had taken so long to get there. The fact FBI brass instructed agents not to investigate that Aussie or the 3 women in Paddock's room tells me that they were probably working for them in one form or another. We know Brian Hards was a weirdo lefty, so mowing down conservatives at a country music concert so the feds can push gun control is well within the realm of possibility. But it doesn't explain the 4 helicopters or that whole cover-up. That implies a much larger operation was going on. The fact helicopters turned off their transponders before the shooting tells me they absolutely played a part in it. And I think it was Metro's incoming helicopter that ended the timing of the shooting and not Paddock just deciding to quit for no reason. One of the closest people in a video I've already showed you saw 2 people in that room.
Two shooters right there in that room.
I think we all know, beyond a doubt, that there were others in that room. And if you really want to have some fun, ask Lombardo if they DNA tested the dildo I know they found. I think certain individuals were tasked with causing distractions across the strip to spread Metro thin, and as long as they didn't hit anyone too far away from the festival, the powers that be could simply deny it ever happened, which apparently they can do. There also seems to be a pattern of distractions leading them up north and away from the airport to the south, where someone might spot all these planecopters and suspects running around, whatever the hell else was going on that night at McCarran. And yes, there really is a secret airline close to the fuel tanks they might have tried to blow up that flies military VIP personnel to the base at Area 51. It is not just a conspiracy. And yes, Saudi royals do own the top floors of Mandalay Bay, and were very likely another high-level target, considering the arrest of deep state Saudi royals occurred just 1 month later. Oh, and look who ended up buying them out. Yay! Conspiracy bingo card complete. The infamous footage of a tactical team going through the Tropicana has nothing to do with the Saudi prince, by the way. That's actually LVPD confiscating the security footage from the Tropicana and taking it away. Specifically, they wanted the high-def footage that overlooked the venue and into Paddock's room. Gee, what do you think they wanted that all for themselves for? I'm hoping a revival of public interest can harass the answers out of the corrupt Nevada government, since national attention and embarrassment is the only thing these fragile ego cowards care about. The fact this entire thing was politicized by government officials into pushing even more gun control is a more believable motive and narrative than no motive at all and none of the facts making sense. Less than a day later, they were pulling pro-Second Amendment bills and pushing for gun control, including the usual sellout, gutless rhinos in the GOP. I think they made a mistake in heavily underestimating the weapon savviness of a country music crowd that were quick to recognize that this was not one person. Hence, they were forced to bury the story instead of shamelessly pumping it out, as the news usually does with tragedies like this. I believe the CEOs of the hotel buried what happened because it was bad for tourism and thus bad for their own bank accounts. It doesn't hurt that MGM owned and controlled most of them to boot. Also doesn't hurt that MGM's CEO had the psychic foresight to dump his stock like he knew it was going to happen. Then they ordered the local and mainstream media to stop reporting on the incident, while social media actively censored alternative narratives and fake fact checkers denied anything else ever happened because that's what fake fact checkers do. They police opinions that could expose the people paying them. Alternative news sources and investigative journalists have been exposing fraud for years, but getting all the facts all together and out to the masses is an uphill battle in a world where censorship has become as rampant as it is. But why? Because our government is corrupt, inadequate, and shitty, and they've been chiseling away our protected constitutional rights for decades, using tragedies like this to line their pockets and serve their own political causes. It's not a right or left-wing thing either. It's both parties. And they've been taxing us and pissing away most of the money in ways that always seem to boomerang back into their pockets in kickbacks, money laundering through relatives, book deals, speaking engagements, whatever. Before social media, people only had the news. Why do you think they censor journalists and websites harder than anything else on social media? Questioning the government is dangerous for the government. And if killing innocent American civilians to push political theater seems a little too crazy for you, let me fill you in on some background. First, when people say Route 91 is the largest mass shooting in American history, that's not actually true. It's only true if you don't count the times it was our own government doing the shooting. Like the time they shot over 250 innocent Native Americans on purpose and 25 of their own troops by accident at Wounded Knee. And if that seems too far removed, then they also did it as recently as 1993, when the ATF shot at and then burned 76 people alive in Waco, Texas, including 2 pregnant women and 25 children, all over suspected illegal weapons. Way to keep America safe there. It's not always accidental either. In 1962, the U.S. Department of Defense proposed a plan called Operation Northwoods, where the feds wanted to stage and carry out an attack on American civilians to blame it on a foreign enemy to start a very profitable war, which at the time happened to be Cuba. You can look all of this up. Our own Joint Chiefs of Staff concocted plans to blow up U.S. ships or stage riots. One plan to avoid civilian casualties, involved loading up a passenger plane, giving people backstories and aliases, unloading them, and then using an unmanned drone masquerading as that plane to be shot down, start a war, and then ultimately get Americans killed during wartime anyway. And they wonder why people think certain things. Unbelievably, every chief of staff signed off on it at the time, except President Kennedy. And we all know what happened to him. Subsequently, President Johnson took over and within months used the Gulf of Tonkin incident that we already suspected was fake then, but now thanks to released documents, know for sure, to leverage war powers from Congress to drag America into the Vietnam War. A war which benefited absolutely no one other than the military-industrial complex selling weapons of war, tanks, bombs, guns, and chemicals like napalm and Agent Orange that poisoned our troops, civilians, and everything in between. Let that sink in for a second. We lost over 58,000 service members in one of the bloodiest, most pointless wars of all time over a lie pushed by a sitting U.S. president. It didn't end there either, I hate to tell you. But before Route 91 happened, Congress was set to vote through 2 pro-gun bills, one concealed carry permit reciprocity bill, and one loosening restrictions on suppressors to protect gun enthusiasts, law enforcement, and military from hearing loss. After the Vegas shooting, everything was shelved, and the feds, as an added bonus, got their undying wish to ban bump stocks. Bump stocks are crap, and few seem to care, but I was looking forward to having my Nevada concealed permit carry over to other states I traveled through, so I'm not theoretically an accidental felon for crossing state lines. It should be like a driver's license, valid in all 50 states. But anyway, they clearly wanted more, but without being able to push the story in the media due to all its holes, That's all they got. That and whatever money they made selling extra security devices. We'll never know what other underlying targets and causes they got or accomplished either. Not without severe public outcry to uncover the rest of the cover-up, which I hope happens with this video. I hope a lot of people wake up to what our government's capable of after this. Think about how the last 2 years alone and how corrupt government officials got caught funding a virus to make it more deadly to us, and then they used it to take away our most basic rights and freedoms. They're spending money and creating debt in a way the next generation will never be able to get out from under. And all the while doing whatever the hell they want themselves, like the hypocritical parasites they are. The FBI, the government, our politicians, they are all out of control, and they have been for a while. We need to return to the original understanding of our Constitution and strip the federal government back down to only the powers originally allotted to it. Our founding fathers didn't trust the government either, and now I can see why. But most importantly, we the people should be mad as hell. We should be demanding the truth en masse from Sheriff Lombardo, Governor Sisolak, FBI agent Aaron Roos, and anyone still covering this tragedy up until we as Americans get the rightful answers we deserve. And until we do, nothing will change.